topics. And before we begin, I just want to let you know that we are going to be recording this if you haven't seen it as you popped in. We just ask that everybody hold their questions to the end. And any questions that you have, please put it in the chat room for us so that we can call them out, and Elisa and her guest can work with us and answer her questions. But before we begin, I just want to introduce our superintendent of schools. That's Christopher Piliteri.
Thank you very much, Erin. And can you everyone hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, because I don't see myself. I pulled over on the side of the road so I can take part at the beginning here and just thank our presenter, Officer McVeigh, and Erin, thank you for putting this together for our parents. A really important topic, a little bit of a scary topic, but an important topic. I'm glad we're having this conversation with the community and with our local police, very supportive, and we thank them for that. And I will jump off and finish my ride home and then jump back on again. But thank you so much. A really important topic.
Thanks for joining us, Ex-Piliteri. Okay, Officer McVeigh, if you don't mind introducing yourself, and we can begin.
Thank you so much. Good evening. Thank you so much to Sachem District for inviting the Suffolk County Police Department to talk to the community, to talk to parents about a very important topic. And it is also a very disturbing topic to imagine the thought of our children being in a school situation of an active shooter. A little bit about myself. I work out of the Homeland Security section in Yaphank at police headquarters, and I'm here with my coworker, Officer Lamore. And we work across the county in helping to guide schools, businesses, places of worship with safety strategies, active shooter awareness. And we are aiming to build a better consistency for school districts across the county, because as we know, there are many different school districts, public schools, private schools, preschools, and we want to build that consistency of safety. Every precinct has a school resource officer. So Sachem does cover a few different precincts. So we have Officer Keith Murphy, Officer Skipon, Officer Rutolo, and they're in the schools to handle school incidents. If the school would like to make a report, they're close by to the precinct, but we all work together. So before we get into the topic, I do want to stress to you that we will see two videos. If they might be rather disturbing, but we're showing them not to critique or criticize, but we're using them to learn from and to talk to parents about why schools do what they do, why our active shooter survival strategies are different in a school versus a public setting. And I want to emphasize, with COVID, the last 2 years have really put we find ourselves a little behind in certain ways with COVID. And I know that the Sachem District, because I've been working with them, never forgot about safety during that time. Prior to working with this unit, I did work with the classroom, the health classes. So I may have had some of your children with classroom instruction as a guest speaker. So I am very familiar with the Sachem District, and you're always very proactive to the issues that our children face. Now, keeping perspective, we have a greater chance of being struck by lightning than being involved in an active shooter incident. We have a greater chance of winning the lottery. And the chances of something like this happening are very, 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 very slim, which is a good thing. And however, in a dangerous situation, we don't have time to think. That's why schools plan, that's why schools prepare. The good news with fire drills and fires in a school setting, there hasn't been a fatal fire within at least 50 years in a school setting, because we have it down in schools. Our children, our teachers, they know what to do if that fire alarm rings. And with active shooters, our fine motor skills will quickly dissolve and we won't have time to think. So it's all muscle memory. But just to also stress that schools are very, very, very extremely safe places. They're more safe than ever before. And our schools every day, including Sachem, they work harder and harder every day. What can we do better? How can we make it safe? They have great policies and procedures in place. So why are we talking about this? Why are we talking to parents about what schools are doing? Because it has come to a point where our children, they really know a lot more than we might in a school setting. And sadly, in a way that they're not even fazed by these drills anymore because they're just used to it. So it's sad in a way that we have to practice for these reasons, but it's also good that they are aware of it and they know what to do. And when we talk about the awareness of active shooter, I'll talk about what an active shooter is, what we might have to do in a school situation, and also what happens if we're in a public setting. And as I mentioned, if it differs, why the two differ. An active shooter does not care about ourselves. They don't care about our children. They don't care. Their only goal is to take out as many people as they can in the quickest amount of time. So it's very, very, very rare that a person will go into a school out of nowhere on any given day randomly and say, this is what I'm doing. These acts typically are planned. They can be planned up to a year, several months up to a year. And they know that the police response will be very, very quick. And luckily in Suffolk County, we have a great response time. And whereas many states, maybe the response time is very timely compared to our response time. But even if for an incident such as this, it's 2 minutes, those 2 minutes, we can all admit, they feel like 2 hours for the victim involved. So we're going to talk about why schools are taught to buy time, or any person to buy time upon police arrival. And when we hear the word active shooter, we might think that's only involving a weapon of some sort, but it can also any means to take lives, including vehicles, car rammings, explosives, flammables, edged weapons. And when I mention that they plan, they typically, it starts out with a grievance, and that grievance builds and builds and builds. And we'll go into more detail about how that might happen. And when we talk about school incidents and school threats, they are very, very proactive in reporting school threats to the police. I will talk to you about what happens when a school becomes aware of a threatening post on social media, or maybe a teacher overhears something that is threatening, or maybe a threat is reported to a guidance counselor or principal, but we do take these threats seriously. I will also tell you that when the Suffolk County Police Department investigates a nature of a threat, we will find out if it's credible or not. We have a very serious investigation process, and if we find any credibility to the threat, we would work hand in hand with the school. And I share that with you because typically when a school threat becomes aware to the community, the attendance rate for schools decreases. We have, understandably, parents are concerned. They might keep their child home depending on that threat, but we are always heavily involved when it becomes reported to us. So today, my friends, this really is about survival strategies, making you become aware of what we talk about in schools, what we talk about with our teachers, and for our own survival strategies, because luckily things are becoming more back to normal. The summer is approaching. We'll be out and about. We can go to the movies again. We can go to the beach. We can go to outdoor concerts. So hopefully we can all gain some different way of thinking about tonight's topic. What I'm going to start with you, a call that happened further west in Suffolk County. If you remember, and every district was made aware of a school threat on December 17th. It was the day before Nassau County had received information, and the districts were just made aware. And this call came on that day of the threat. And I want to share this with you because when calls are reported to 911, this is what we might see. And there could be a miscommunication. So just to share with you what our job entails. So on December 17th of this past year, a student had reported to an administrator of a building that they did see a gun, and this was a middle school. And what happened was the student notified his parent that someone brought a gun to school, that the school was on lockdown. And if we could read the details, it's very, very concerning, especially to imagine being a parent receiving this kind of message from their child. So the son reports it to the parent. It wasn't the school at first that called 911. It was the parent that called 911 based on what their child was telling them. And so the parent calls 911, and this is what's reported to police. So as we can assume, we can read and only assume that, yes, the school is getting a heavy police response. It looks like, and we're responding as if it's a real situation. The school's on lockdown, gun in the school. It was so serious, and this is how we would respond, that we, of course, notified our ambulance. They were staging down the street. We had our canine, we had all our resources en route to this location. So the police go there, they arrive on scene, and they walk into the building, and the principal is looking at them thinking, what's going on? They actually had no idea that the police were notified. And so we could see that there was a difference of communication. So the school had no clue that we were, because what happened was, it was an incident where they were handling it within the building. They did not see a threat. It was definitely different than what we see here. It was an incident they were trying to get to the bottom of. There was no actual threat, but we can see here that of the possibility of miscommunication, which could be dangerous. So luckily it wasn't a real situation. No one got hurt. The school did a wonderful job because they were handling things according to their response plan, and everything resolved itself. But this is just to show you what kind of situation we might receive. Every school has what's called an emergency response plan, and you might see the district plan on the website, but the school plan is not necessarily put on the website because we also have to think of safety of our students. So we're not necessarily going to publicize maybe bus pickup times or further details, but the school plans for most situations as best they can. And we all know that during a real situation that nothing goes cookie cutter according to plan, but it is there as a guide, and it's important that our schools know the plan, they know it well, and they train their staff on it. So we'll also go through some of the terms that our children will be taught in school and what they respond to as well. And a lot of times we might think of an incident itself, but we don't think of after the incident, how might we recover from a horrific incident. And of course, now we focus on the public, the medical, mental, the health part of it. And we see that the past couple of years where we have families that are sadly struggling with what happened the past 2 years, that people were isolated, whether there's an increase in substance abuse, whether our children we feel might be lacking social skills, or their anxiety has increased. So we really have a focus on the mental health right now, especially.
So right now we're in a school, an active shooter. It's not a drill.
A disturbing clip from Parkland, Florida, and I share that with you because typically it's the reaction to the sound of gunfire, whether it's a school, whether it's a public setting, and schools will always make an attempt to put an announcement over the PA system, whether it's automated or in person, but there are times where we don't have the time. So it's that sound that reacting. And the bottom line is that we teach schools and we teach the public that doing nothing is not an option. There are people that might have the tendency to freeze up into that fetal position and not move, but we can't do that. Doing nothing is not an option. I'm going to stress that. And that's why we talk about options of what we might have to do. And really, what we're talking about tonight is the 2022 Stop, Drop, and Roll. Hopefully you've never been in a fire, but if we are in one, we know what to do. So today we're going to talk about run, hide, fight, and how it works and pertains in a school setting. So just to show you that the incidents studied by the FBI, that this is where they're happening. They're happening in schools, they're happening in most places are commerce, but schools, as I stress, are very safe places, and open spaces are on the rise as we see, and also places of worship. And also tonight is not to make us paranoid, not to have our children be paranoid. We are to enjoy our life. We're to have fun, and really it's just about being aware. Awareness truly is key. So this is important for us to take note of. The average incident, about 12 minutes. school or not, 12 minutes. And more than half of the incidents are over in 5 minutes or less. And more than half of these incidents are over prior to the police even getting onto the scene. So basically, if I ask you what that means, if we were in person right now, I'm sure we'd say, okay, basically we're on our own. We're on our own for that short amount of time. Most of the time, these incidents, it is a male, not always the case, but 96% of the time it's a male. And most of the time it's one attacker. And I share these studies with you because this is going to help us build our plan. If we're out in public and if we hear, and we're in the mall and we hear what could be the sound of gunfire coming from my right, okay, 98% of the time it's one, and we use our common sense, I'm just going to run to my left. If I'm not there, I'm not going to get shot. And that's important for you to build your plan because, of course, when something is happening, we don't know what's happening. We don't know what it is. Was it fireworks at first? Is there more than one attacker? It sounds like it could be more than one attacker, but that's 98% of the time. And as I mentioned to you, these attackers are guided. And whether it's the homegrown terrorists, our biggest threat right now, we call them the lone wolves. We have anti-government radicals, and we might think that a person, an active shooter, is diagnosed as mentally ill, but that's not always the case. They're clearly suffering from some kind of emotional crisis. So something is going on in their life, and they have that grievance, whether it's the former graduate of the school, whether it's the student, whether it's the doctor's fault because he or she is the reason why my loved one passed away, whether it's my supervisor because I was terminated. So it tends to build and build and build and build. And then they tend to become obsessed with past incidents. And then they start the planning process. And chances are these attackers, they know the location very well, their target location. They might know their response plan. They might know, chances are they know that door that's been propped open. That's the easiest way to get into the building. And then they might research online. Do they have access to weapons? Are they purchasing body armor? And what's great about the schools and being that they're proactive is that when there's a sign that someone needs help, doesn't mean they're going to be an active shooter, but whatever that sign might be, that they're struggling, we have so many counselors available. We have working with the parents, the police department, so they can easily help identify if there is a person that we might need to get them that help that they need. And just to show you what's on the internet, I highly suggest don't Google this, but we want to let you know what's out there. And it is disturbing that there are chat rooms that discuss past incidents and how, and in their mindset, how they can do better, as they call it, how they can get a higher body count. There is publications, how to make a bomb in the kitchen of your mom. There are terror guides. And sometimes they talk about, well, what's the best way to rent a U-Haul truck and easiest way to get out of the building. And they even talk about just putting a box in your hand, because chances are if we see someone struggling outside the door, we're going to want to help them. So when we talk to schools, we tell them, okay, being nice is a good thing, but we don't always want to be so nice. So this always is a concern too of buildings of piggybacking, as we might call it, where we want to hold the door for the parent, dropping off the lunch or books, or just going in for a meeting, especially with our younger students, kindergarten age. And it's hard for someone not to hold the door for someone, but if we're not familiar with them, it's best to let the school do its job, let them buzz that person in, and let them do their due diligence to see why they want to be in the building and what their purpose is. Because also these attackers do plan for the most vulnerable times of a day. And if we look at a school setting, arrival, dismissal, lunchtime. So just to be aware. Also with online threats, we call them Zoom bombings, where you might have even experienced this in the past when Zoom was just starting up 2 years ago, where links were made public. The Sachem district tonight, it's great. They have a waiting room. They have to log on to be in. It's not just publicized to everyone and anyone to click on the link. And We also have to be mindful of what our children might be exposed to online as well, because like I said, that material is out there, and it's where people converse, and we don't want them exposed to that. So it can't hurt to just be mindful of what they're up to when they're on their devices. This chart is not to show you or make you think, all right, I'm never doing anything again, or I'm not letting my child go to the mall. Like I said, awareness is key. So when do we take action? We take action rapidly at the first sign of any trouble. So schools are taught, and when they practice their lockdown drills, they are taught when the busiest time of day is. Some do their lockdown drills during lunchtime, arrival time, dismissal time. And when we talk about our drills, just to put you parents at ease, that schools now will not try to scare our children. They're not just going to say, okay, let them think that it's a real thing. New York State Education advises that when a drill is called, that we simply state that it's a lockdown drill. We don't want to traumatize our students. And chances are you do receive an email in the beginning of the week that there is a lockdown drill sometime this week, or maybe they get more specific, or even after the drill, you might receive another alert as well. So again, we rapidly act as the first sign of any trouble, and that really goes for any kind of setting. We do respect the alarms wherever we might be, and we don't want to fall victim to bystander inaction. Basically, what that means is that if we don't know what we're doing, there's a good chance that we're going to listen to someone that doesn't know what they're doing. So I'm going to share some concerns that schools do confide in the police, because they sometimes hear things from the students that maybe the school's practicing the lockdown stance, which we'll go over greatly, but sometimes they approach a teacher or administrator and say, well, my mom and dad, my dad tells me to run out of the building and not care whatever the teacher says. So we're going to talk about why the lockdown stance is successful. And we're going to talk about the importance of also in a situation of this nature of common sense as well. So the emergency response terms that are used in a school setting, number one, shelter in place. This typically is for a bad weather incident. So if instructed, schools are guided to evacuate, they're listening for instructions, they have student accountability. So it could be that bad weather situation. Shelter in place. Hold in place. We are seeing schools, especially this year, use this more frequently. This is for a short-term incident. Maybe it's the health incident in the hallway. Maybe there's a student that's having a seizure, and everybody hold in place, or if you're near your classroom, go to your nearest classroom, and therefore we need to make room for the ambulance. And sometimes, especially if they're younger students, they might not necessarily want to upset them by seeing the EMTs and the police officers. So hold in place. It also could be used for a school fight. Okay, everybody hold in place, go back to your classrooms if possible. So you want to limit the student and the teacher movement. Then we have evacuation, which we know this extremely well with our fire drills, for example, or maybe it's a gas leak, or maybe it's the small fire out of the student science lab. So we all have the evacuation location. Our students know it well, whatever class they're in, they're guided by their teacher. Now, this is where, as parents, we might get a little confused, and to receive any kind of notification from the district, or like I said, from one of our children, it's extremely, extremely terrifying. So lockout and lockdown can be, as I stress, mixed up with each other. So lockout is when something is happening around the school property. And if, let's be honest, schools pretty much operate in a modified lockout every day, where there's that visitor, strict policy, that procedure, but an official lockout is no one is allowed to enter or exit the building, and everyone's safe inside, and school is going on in normal inside. Classes are being taught, instructions being taught, but no one is allowed to enter or exit the building, which it could cause delay for dismissal. They could, there are situations where they could still have to be in a building, but it's also not always the police incident. It could be the vicious animal on the property. It could be the bank robbery down the block, but something's going on where everyone's safe in school, we keep them in the building. Lockdown means that there is an active threat inside the school building, So lockout, as I said, just again to review, because they're confusing, they can be. The lockout, threat, emergency, or threat is near the campus. Outdoor activities suspended, students in the classrooms, updates are given, attendance is taken. Lockdown, this is where in schools, and the Suffolk County Police stance as well, it's lockdown, meaning students are instructed to get behind that locked door as guided by their teachers. And they practice drills every year for a year. Some schools will do more on their own, but New York State does mandate these drills. So teachers are guided, they're taught what happens if it's in the cafeteria, what happens if a student is in the restroom. And typically the police department, we always will stress the most important thing for our teachers to remember is to have the door locked, get behind the locked door. So why that is so important, the studies that were done, an active shooter has never yet breached through a locked door. There were situations where the glass was defeated, but never yet has an active shooter breached through a locked door. And you might be questioning, well, what's the difference of a lockdown versus let everybody run in and out of the building? You can't have hundreds of students running everywhere and out of the building. That will actually increase the carnage. That's what they're aiming to have. So therefore, the theory behind the lockdown of why it's so successful is that if it looks like no one is in the classroom and if the door is locked, there is a good chance that that threat is going to continue on. Going back to what they know that the police will be on the scene very, very quickly. So therefore, they're not necessarily going to spend the time fumbling with that locked door. So we always stress again, most important is have the doors locked. Also schools, as parents, sometimes we might read about products that are out there. I know our office years ago would get flooded with phone calls about what products to use. We're totally against the products. We always guide just a simple locked door is key and a door chock if they have it. And if we think why against the products, the devices, because it violates fire code. And there's a more chance that a school's going to have a fire than an active shooter incident. So we always have to be mindful about all our threats that we might face, not just one threat. So simple locked door is key. So teachers are instructed to check out for others outside the classroom. My experience during lockdown drills, teachers are very good about sweeping the hallways, as we call it, meaning they will check for others outside the classroom. And they do that because typically once the door is locked, it's locked, which is, it's a hard thing that to have to do. And hopefully no one has to do this, but if there's a knock on the door yelling, let me in, chances are they're not gonna open the door. Once the door is locked, it's locked. And that is the stance of the school setting. So of course, some of you might be wondering, well, okay, not everything, as I said earlier, goes according to plan. This is where common sense has to come in. So ideally, overall school stance is get behind the locked door, but if they're in a unique setting and that teacher is common sense right next to that push bar door, they're gonna have to use their common sense. They're gonna have to use their common sense. Okay, what is my mindset right now? How am I going to best guide the students I have, and what am I gonna do to save our lives? But that, again, that's that unique situation, not applying to an entire school setting. So hopefully you have a better understanding of why our schools use the lockdown policy. And we teach train our teachers to have that survival mindset. And we understand that it's nothing that teachers signed up for. It's extremely disturbing to even think about how we might have to act in a setting like that. And we stress that doing nothing is not an option. So here's the example of what we talked about with the locked doors. We can see in the first photo that we see people through the glass in a lockdown drill. We don't want to see that. We want to see where that viewing panel, it's hard to see. So that's why our students have to get really close in that corner on top of each other where it looks like no one is in the room. With COVID, as we know, schools did modify their drills. Suffolk County Police, our stance never changed, but we did work with schools, whatever they chose, however they chose to do their drills. And during COVID, the students, chances are, were in their seats and the teachers were instructing them what they might have to do in a setting. So it's really important as a parent too, to have the conversation with our children and to talk to them about what they're taught in school or what they understand, or if they have any questions. And just something personal on my end, my children go to a school where they did have to call a lockdown. It was the situation of an irate parent. Luckily, nobody was threatened in the sense, is more of the unknown threat. What might this person do next? So the principal did a wonderful job by calling a lockdown because that person was already in the school. It was very loud. It was getting very violent. So she made a wonderful decision. But there was a situation where we did have a student that was outside a room. And then we did have my own child said, the teacher didn't lock the door. It was a substitute teacher and they just weren't familiar. It was a teacher, didn't really teach there that much. So my daughter told me that. She goes, I had to lock the door, Mommy. And was I happy about it? No, but I was happy that my child knew what to do. So she said she ended up having to lock the door, and the teacher had her crawl back to the end of the room. But luckily, like I said, nobody was hurt. Teacher did a wonderful job, but it is important for us to tell our child, because nobody knows really how they would react if they're hearing those gunshots. We're taught this information. We think we might know what we would do, but in reality, people might do something completely different. So have that conversation. And here is also another example of locked doors. Some settings are just bad, like an office setting, for example, where the office is surrounded by complete glass. And our schools really work best with what they have. And that's the best that we can do. So what I'm going to show you now, I actually show this video in schools to teachers. And this will really sum up our conversation about how lockdowns, how they've been successful. This is an animated from Parkland, Florida. And in a few moments, you will hear the radio transmissions. The first floor had no idea what was happening. The second floor, everyone knew what was happening. Everyone locked down. Everyone survived on the second floor. The third floor, the fire alarm went off. So the third floor started to evacuate as if there was a fire. And then they realized what was happening. So there were issues on the third floor with staff not having their key on their person and being unable to get back into the classroom because the door was already locked. So we will see the purple dots show the murdered victims, yellow dots show injured.
District 15, possible shots fired at 5901 Pine Island Road at Stillman Douglas High School. Possible shots fired at Stillman Douglas High School.
And if you look at the time, it's dismissal time, busy time of day.
1. Keep the school locked down, gentlemen. I just know it's not working. It's signal 33 going to Bravo down for regular traffic. Some sort of say they thought it was fire crashes and we're not sure. About the football field. All right, 26, we also heard it over by inside the 1200 building. We're walking down the school right now. Make sure there's no pedestrian traffic anywhere on Holmberg Road. Yeah, I could do one. Give it a 51. Yeah, I could do it. If we have any 50 mulligan at the Frank Fun office.
The attacker makes his way across the hallway and he does try to shoot through glass in a staircase setting, but it was hurricane glass because it's Florida. And he exited the building at dismissal with his hands up as if he were one of the victims, and he was later caught at a nearby fast food establishment. And this is 1 week after Parkland in Ocala, Florida. So we could see here, and these are what our teachers are taught to do, to lock the door, not just lock, but also barricade the door. And that's for any setting. If we have to secure ourselves, to lock, barricade. And that's when I mentioned those door chalks can come in handy, because if maybe our lock doesn't work properly, or we don't have one, or we just need that extra way to buy time. Lock the door, chalk the door, barricade the door. And we can see here that you can't even see the door. So they did a great job. And when we talk about school settings, okay, as I mentioned, the run, hide, fight, that's the model that we use. Those are our 3 options. It doesn't have to be in that order. It's just the easiest way to remember it. So therefore, if you're out in public, if you're at the mall, if you're in an open setting, your number 1 priority really is to get out of there, to run if you can, to get out of that situation. Then you might, and the option you might have is, if you're at the mall, you might have to hide. Maybe you're already in the store and they're pulling down those gates within the store. So we secrete ourselves and hide. And the ultimate last resort, and this is not expected of any students whatsoever. We do not expect children to do it. We tell the teachers this is when you're not giving up. And this is for anyone. When I say the ultimate last resort, it is to fight. And when we say fight, it could be using tools that we have on hand in a school setting. It could be a computer, it could be pens, it could be water bottles, fire extinguishers, great for any kind of setting, because anyone can use them. You either pull the pin and you spray, and some of the newer models, you can just really press a button, but no one can see 30 feet into that fog. So that's a great distraction. So when we go into schools, we talk about what other ways we can fight, and we can scream for help, obviously. These incidents are survivable if we know what to do. When we go out to presentations, we ask people, and we'll ask them, how many of you, we usually ask before we go into the presentation, and say, how many of you could survive an active shooter incident? And not many raise their hands. We're like, why is everybody dying? We're not dying, because, as I stress, these incidents are survivable if we know what to do. It's being aware. It's not doing nothing. And it's not just crawling on the floor and getting into that ball as we might feel. And it's not being in denial, because maybe we hear that sound and we pause, wait for it to hear it again. We don't want to be in denial about anything. This was an incident in London a few years ago, where if this was a few years ago, I'd be telling you most attackers take their life prior to police getting onto the scene. But we're seeing more that attackers are engaging with law enforcement, and we see them leaving as victims, and we also see more civilians getting involved. But as I keep stressing, we're not giving up. Other ways that we could buy time, depending on the setting. Does the door go in and out? Does the lock work properly? And some of you might also be wondering, how do the police respond? Suffolk County Police response, and this pretty much is the protocol across the country right now, that the first officer on the scene, they are entering the building, they're going in. We're not waiting outside for a tactical team. Ideally, it would be great to have backup, but if we're first on the scene, we're going in. And our main goal at that point is to neutralize the threat, which means that we would have to bypass victims if the threat is not neutralized. And the mindset behind that is stop the killing so we can stop the dying. Once the threat is neutralized, there is a slow, methodic way that a building would have to be cleared. And if we imagine a school setting, that will take hours depending on the size of the building. So our teachers are taught or reminded to ideas of how to handle students for a long amount of time. For some of you that might have children who are diabetic, something to think about, which I learned during a lockdown drill. Maybe it's good to put juices or candy, something to, if they're facing a low. Great idea if they're in that setting for a long time and their glucose number is dropping, they're feeling low. So something to think about. And also, we like to see people's hands because we know that person if the hands are visible at all times. We don't want them to be a threat to us. So once we enter the building. So every school is extremely safe, as I say. A lot of the schools will share access cards with the local sector or that school resource officer. I will also go over with you some programs that the county provides, reference getting access to the building because they're so secure. So sometimes we wonder, how are we getting in? But we're getting in no matter what. But as I said several times tonight, time is very important. So the quickest way we can get in is great. And accurate reporting is essential. We have a share program. This is one of the programs I just mentioned, and this stands for Sharing to Help Access Remote Entry. This is a free program by Suffolk County Police Department where school districts, if they agree, we are able to, with our detectives from criminal intelligence detectives, they're able to tap into a school's cameras only in the situation of an active shooter, and the doors will be open upon police arrival. So this is where the legal forms are signed, the school district has to approve it. Then our detectives work with the school district's technology company and we have it all set up. And this is where, as I mentioned, the school doors will be open upon police arrival and our detectives will be able to see the cameras and direct officers to where that threat might be. So that's one program that we have. We also have a RAVE app, which some districts are trying to implement. And this is the path of violence that I already discussed with how it typically works. 1 year average, at least several months. And schools are very, very good about reporting anything to the police immediately. That's key. And parents, you've been a great help as well, because there are many times after hours on the weekends, late at night, where your child is receiving something on Snapchat, they saw something on Instagram about a school threat, and we have parents that will report incidents, so that's great. So typically when the police are notified of a school threat, we have that responding officer take the report. They immediately will notify their supervisor. The report will then go to our precinct crime section. There are plainclothes officers, and they will take statements depending on the incident. They will forward any information to our criminal intelligence detectives. There might be an arrest involved. If not, we're going to find a way how to get this person help, depending on if the law is violated or not. And then their chances are, yeah, there's going to be a heavy police presence the day or days following the school threat, because we want to make sure everything is safe. We want to make sure our students feel safe, because understandably, anything like that happens, they're going to be nervous. Chances are going to school that day. So we want to put everyone at ease and investigate to the bottom of that threat. 911, of course, we always call 911. Suffolk County has texting capabilities. We can text 911. This is my information. Please feel free, email me, call me. Any questions that you have now, anything, hopefully I didn't confuse anyone. But let's go over and review anything that you might be concerned about or just want to know more about. Thank you for participating tonight.
Thank you so much, Officer McVeigh. We are so thankful that you joined us tonight, you and your partner, and we really appreciate all the information that you shared. As parents and our community members, we hope that you just got a little bit more of an insight as to how we run our drills and the necessity for it and some information around it. So at this time, if you do have any questions, we would just ask that you put it in the chat room for us, so that Officer McVeigh can answer them for you. At what age do we start having fire safety drills, any safety drills?
We encourage schools to drill as far as pre-K, as young as possible. And the mindset of that is to really get into the muscle memory and to have our teachers, most importantly, because a 4-year-old, we don't expect them to have to know exactly what to do, but they're going to need to be guided by their teachers. So the more that we drill with them, the more comfortable they are, and they will discuss the drill in an age appropriate way. And I'll tell you, those 4 or 5-year-olds, when we go to schools, we're so impressed. They're great. And then we do, when we have the police go in, because we like to work with the schools for lockdown drills, we like to be there. And there have been some districts that were very hesitant in having police be there for a drill. And we have teachers where we were told that we're nervous the police were going to be there. They feel like they're being graded, but it's not at all the case. We like to go actually so we can learn the layout of the building. We don't want the first time to get to a school is when something tragic happens. We want to have that communication. We want to have that good working relationship, which we do. And also when the time allows, we do like to do a little 30-second visit in each classroom. Good job. And we like to be friendly and say hello, because as I stress, our goal is not to have anyone scared. So to answer the question, it's yes, as young as the school allows. We like everybody to be on board with our safety drills.
Yes, absolutely. We want to be partners, right, with our local police department, and whether it's our SROs or other programs that we've had in the past, it is important. And so any drills that do occur, they occur for the entire building. Is Sachem security system linked up with police department presently? And if not, is that something that is being contemplated?
Great question. Yeah, I'm vouching for you because like I said, I worked with Sachem District for several years, and I used to work in the 6th precinct, and I can talk firsthand that the answer to that question is as far as security guards and the relationship, we have a great working relationship. But to answer about if the question is about the share program.
Yeah, and we do have SROs, again, at each building. Jack,
I can answer that. Yeah, I can answer that question. We definitely do have the connection with the police department. We set that up a couple of years ago. We're able to set up direct tunnel so they can get in for any time that they would need to in a secure situation.
And like I said in the beginning, I do want to thank for the district to offer this out to the community and to parents, because this is where we want to really get on board. And one thing that I really want to stress as well, that in an emergency situation, such as an active shooter, schools have what's called a reunification site. This site is an alternate location where students will go and parents will go to pick up their child, and even family members of our staff members. The reason why the districts have reunification sites is because we can't have parents showing up at the school. We know that it will happen, and it does happen. Like I showed you firsthand with that call, you can imagine the concern that parent had when their child was texting them that information. So naturally, first instinct as a parent is to want to get up to that school. And naturally, those children, they're our most prized possessions. We're going to get in that building no matter what. Even I've been in situations where there are lockdowns where parents show up and they try to have confrontations with the police, not on purpose, but they're just so nervous and upset that their child could be in danger. But it's important that as parents, we listen regularly to the updates that our school provides. Chances are there's a messaging system that we go to, and the schools are all trained on their messaging system. Frequent updates, very important. And in any kind of situation of this nature, parents will be made aware of where they need to respond to go get their child. And it's not at the school itself. And the reasons for that being, it's an active scene, criminal nature, and also we can't have traffic being affected because the amount of police that are going to be responding to something of this nature is every and any agency. It's everyone close by. It's not just Suffolk County Police, it's the sheriffs, it's our environmental police, it's our undercover detectives, it's everyone and anyone. We're all coming. And therefore, if we also have that large number of parents showing up at the school, it's going to affect that response time greatly. So reunification sites are very important. And those are sites that the district has in place already. It's not public knowledge for our safety. And of course, depending on the incident, but they have those plans already in place, just in case.
Okay, Officer McVeigh, I want to thank you so much for your time tonight. I apologize, my internet keeps saying unstable internet. Sometimes I feel that way the days that we're in. But I do want to share with everybody that this is being recorded, as you know, and it will be posted to our YouTube website. So we're really thankful for your presence today coming here, and please spread the word as we continue to have more parent workshops. And again, Officer McVeigh, we so appreciate your continued partnership and everything that you do for the Sachem School District, and we look forward to more.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night. Thank you for
Thank you.
being here.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.